Hello, everyone. Today we have here as our esteemed guest, Mia. She's co-CEO and a founder of Denizen Immigration. Mia, please go ahead and introduce yourself and your company.
My name is Mia. Thank you for the introduction. And my immigration law firm is called Denizen Immigration. Um, and people say, well, what is denizen? What does that mean? And actually, denizen, it's an old English word. So back in the olden kings and queens days, there were three classes of people in Old England. One were the citizens who born there, raised there, and were subjects of the crown. And then you had the aliens who sort of migrated there, but had no rights to live and work in that society and were therefore, kind of being under the radar. And then you had this middle area called the denizens, and they were people who were given authority by the crown to live and work in the country, but didn't rise to the level of citizens, no voting rights and other sorts of things. So it was, people who had a right to live and work in a country that was not their home country, and they were referred to as the denizens. So that's what we work on, making people denizens of the United States, but actually globally at this point as well.
Awesome. So, what inspired you to really start Denizen Immigration? Give our audience an inside view about it and the services you offer.
Immigration for me started from a very young age is what inspired me to go to law school. I'm from California, a licensed California attorney, but I was born and raised on a dairy farm in the Central Valley in California. And so the farming industry, the agricultural industry, the dairy industry is really dependent on, you know, immigrants and immigration. And then as I proceeded through life and in college, and then I went to law school in the Silicon Valley in Santa Clara. Then I saw different types of immigration, right? The highly skilled migrants coming into the Silicon Valley from India and other areas who were helping with the tech startups and the like. But in both cases, you have foreign labor workforce. You have shortages in these industries in California specifically, but all across the United States. And the businesses or employers who really wanted to succeed and to build themselves up and to build their workforce or to even have a stable workforce or to get ahead needed to become reliant on a foreign labor workforce. And so immigration has always been very important and special to me. I am an immigrant now, so while Denizen Immigration is incorporated in the state of California, I live in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And so I immigrated the other way, and I'm a permanent resident of the European Union. And so I work with people who are all over the world. My company is fully remote, and my staff um, consists of people located in Mexico, El Salvador, Colombia, and the United States and the Netherlands. And so we're well positioned to help anyone, anywhere, anytime, but with a focus on United States employers and helping them to bring foreign workers into the country to work with them or to help them retain or attract foreign workers.
So, any employers who have employees or planning to have employees which require sponsorship, right?
Yeah, and in particular, what kind of sets Denizen Immigration apart is I like to think of myself as sort of a fractional immigration general counsel who can handle an entire immigration program for a business. And in particular, I enjoy companies who are at a stage where they're just wanting to dip their toes or they haven't started to attract the workforce yet, and they don't know what the first steps are, and we begin to partner and then create this business strategy in such a way that they can make plans for an immigration budget. They can make plans for reasonable immigration timelines. And we can work together as partners, allowing me to sort of work within their company with HR, with the COO, with the employees, with the recruitees to help them and educate. It's not just about filling out forms, but it's educating every step of the way. At some point in my life, I was an adjunct professor and a teacher. And so I like to take an educational approach. Uh, But immigration is much more than form filling. It's deceptively easy in that sense. I mean, it it looks deceptively easy, but I do see a number of common mistakes that businesses make that make my job a lot more difficult. And had we just partnered from the beginning and established a business strategy that can be used as a strategic growth tool, we can, in fact, reduce delays, avoid surprises, maintain talent flow, set budgets, set timelines, all of these things. And so it's really, and it may be starting with a company who wants to just start with their first H-1B. And we want to sponsor an H-1B person. Let's get into the lottery. Okay, now we've been selected. Now let's do the H-1 filing. Okay, but now that person's been married, let's do an H-4. Well, now we want to sponsor them for a green card. What should we do? Should we do a perm, or should we, help them with an EB-2 NIW profile? And we talk through all of those things. And then we create immigration policies that can be applied across all of the departments and applied fairly. We all the way from the pre-filing and the strategy and the policies, all the way through to the compliance enforcement, doing internal audits of I-9s, ensuring all of that is correct. We provide a very personalized service to a select number of businesses who value this sort of white glove, start to finish immigration service. And it might also include strategic planning of moving people from the US out of the US and into other countries for a number of reasons. That might be something, or, between offices, either internally within the United States or externally. So it's a kind of a both an inbound into the US as well as outbound, working with, my global partners in nearly every country in Europe, Asia, and Latin America.
Nice. So, is it fair to say that your ideal client would be having an office in US and, hiring workers from all across the globe, and your services are kind of white glove services from start to finish and encompasses any aspect of legal immigration?
That's right. It's a company that's either new to hiring foreign talent or seeking to bring all of the structure of their immigration program under one area, and really someone who's seeking. I like to say I'm either the fractional immigration general counsel or the concierge immigration. I know in the US there was the concierge doctors, that sort of thing. You call up, you get the VIP service, and that's
Yes.
what you get here. And it's not about the high volume of one specific visa, although I can do most. But if there's it's about, someone who's managing and providing the services. And if I'm not the expert, I will find the expert, bring them in, and then manage that for everyone as well, whether that be something within the United States or, abroad. So that's right. And it could be someone who's not, new, but is frustrated by a fractured nature of the immigration services they provide. It's not a file and forget type of experience. It's more thoughtful. And I take a select limit of, clients who are a good fit, for me, and I'm a good fit for them. And what we're looking for is someone who does want to be proactive, to create a strategy, to place an importance on compliance, who wants to be educated in the system, not only internally with the employer side, but also with the employee side, and to be willing to consider an employee's short-term strategies alongside long-term strategies. And in return, all of that immigration management will be under one roof, and we'll provide, creative solutions if we can't find anything else.
Very nice. So, this is a perfect segue. So, as you might have noticed, the demand for legal immigration services is rising in America with a notable increase in applications for green cards, visas, and citizenship. Companies are preparing for increased compliance requirements, more frequent audits, and stricter scrutiny of visa applications. Denizen Immigration stand out in supporting some of these companies who have employees in various stages of their immigration processes when you compare to, with limited budget, of course, compared to very large immigration firms that might be out there.
So you're exactly right. I mean, right now, the issue with immigration is that it's unpredictable, that on a daily basis, we are getting changes to immigration. And as a result of that, seemingly easy filing is not easy anymore because of the dangers as it relates to it's a it's a landscape that is constantly changing and it's very unforgiving. And so if you make one mistake, it can set you back not days, not months, but years, and with limited appealability or reviewability. And there is, in addition to that, increased workplace enforcement and changing forms. The I-9s are changing and the ICE is showing up at workplaces. And what worked last month is not going to work this month in many of the areas, right? So it's a very dynamic area, which I actually enjoy because, like I said, I have a background in education. So I spend part of my day every day educating myself on all the changes that had been made overnight in the US while I was asleep. But then we try to bring the predictability in this unpredictable landscape. And how do we do that? We always hope for the best, but plan for the worst.
Absolutely.
And in doing so, right, we will say, okay, here's the situation and here's the recommended strategy and how we go. And when we discuss that, we'll say, okay, this has, over the course of the last 10 years or so, has always remained a very predictable whatever. But within this process, this is the area that might actually be, I'd like to call it like the pre-mortem, right? Instead of the post-mortem, we're doing the pre-mortem. Here's where I predict there will be some unpredictability. Here is where we can anticipate there might be some trouble or some issues. And so as a result of that, we're going to talk through what our plan Bs and our plan Cs are, and we're going to implement them also all at the same time so that if something does go sideways, instead of going all the way back to the beginning or having to send someone out of the country without an interest in doing so, or without having to replace, or maybe losing the talent, we can tell them it's okay. We have something else coming through. That's going to be coming in the next 3 to 6 months. So there's always plan Bs and plan Cs. In terms of compliance, that's the thing that's what separates, in my opinion. It's very frustrating to me because, you have people who are who fill out forms and prepare forms and file forms. And in my opinion, they're like preparers, but they're not attorneys, because attorneys will not only prepare forms and submit forms and fill forms, but they are forward thinking to say, okay, when ICE shows up at your door, or here's everything that you need with compliance. Here's everything, like following up with the payroll to ensure that the I-9s are appropriate, following up with the HR to ensure that the public access file is up to date at all times, planning regular internal audits to ensure that everything is appropriate and updated, because as the changes, in the laws are updated, then we're constantly updating. So, that's the idea, is that if you don't have someone managing within a business itself, it's very fractured, right? Because you do have the very different departments that all operate as silos. So you have the HR, and then you have the payroll, and then you have the manager of the company. And so if you don't have someone who's managing the whole immigration program, which includes the compliance, then that's when there might be issues. So for example, you can have an immigration attorney who files an H-1B for you, but once the H-1B is approved and that attorney is gone, then if that employee is moved to a different office located outside of the area that was set forth in the prevailing wage determination and then approved by USCIS. And that doesn't get triggered as a flag to anybody because no one is managing the immigration. And then, ICE shows up or workplace enforcement shows up, and that guy is not located where he's supposed to be located. Well, now there's a compliance issue. Or if the person was promoted after 3 years and now it's not a substantially similar job and there wasn't an amended or a new H-1B filed for that person, again, employers are opening themselves up to potential compliance issues simply because they didn't know and they don't have someone who's assisting them with the questions all along the way. They didn't even know they were supposed to ask.
Supposed to do that, yeah.
Right. And so when you have someone who is, again, like a partner, like someone that you can always just reach on the phone, call up and say, hey, he wants to move, he's living in Iowa now and he wants to move to Texas. How should we do this? And, and it should be the first question you ask before he moves to say, how should we do this and when will we do so that we can make a strategic decision that is compliant? Okay, if he's moving to a different state, then we first have to file the LCA and then we next have to get it approved by USCIS. But in the meanwhile, and then I work with the employer and the employee to make it all, compliant and according to all the rules and the regulations and all of that. And that's a much easier and cost-effective way to do things than, hey, he moved. Now what do we do?
I know.
Because it's open, there's exposure on the business side and the filing of the immigration paperwork is much more, expensive and much more difficult. And, there may be fines involved and all of that. So again, it requires some foresight. I have like a list of things that I talk about that are like the common mistakes that businesses, in this category make. And one of them is that like being reactive rather than being proactive and strategic in their immigration planning. Another good one is coming and saying, hey, I want to, sponsor this guy on an H-1B. And it's like April 1st. It's like, okay, well, the lottery just took place 30 days ago. So now we've got to wait another 34 days until
Wow.
we can do the next lottery, and he won't be able to start until October of that year. So now you're looking at, 18 months until he can start. But guess what? His OPT ends in 2 months. So now we've lost that opportunity, or maybe we didn't, because maybe we can go park him in another country, or maybe we can look at other solutions to keep him in the country while we wait for the next H-1B. Or maybe what we do is look for an opportunity whereby he or she could avail of a cap exempt H-1B. And
Nice.
so there are other ways that we could handle it, but it would make my job much easier. And also it would make the potential employees' life less stressful. And it would also assist the employer, most importantly, with attracting the, top talent and maintaining a stable workforce or growing their workforce to be able to scale. And truly, if someone wants to scale in the tech world, you have to start an immigration program. And in order to do that, again, it's about, you know, um, understanding, well, what does that take and what is the budget and how does it, and you can say, all right, well, if you bring in this one person this year, and then I can help plan with HR or with your COO or with your CFO and say, okay, for each H-1B person this year, it's going to cost this much for the H-1B. And then every 3 years, we're doing an amended, an extension, and then we're going to need to do a perm in this year, which is going to cost this much, and then an I-140, and then potentially an adjustment of status. And we can do it year by year. I mean, we could do a 10-year plan or an 150-year plan in the case of, Indian H-1Bs, right down the line for every person. And then you write that into your, 1, 5, and 10-year budgets. and then we put it into plan and implement them, right? And then you can say, oh, okay, now I know I can bring in 5 people this year, or 50, or 100, or whatever it is.
So not only saving on potential cost down the road, but also enabling them with the foresight of, okay, here's how we plan our entire workforce immigration strategy. This is how we go and execute. And sounds like you've got some creative solutions to some of the problems that are very much prevalent in the industry, especially as we are returning to office from being remote. More and more folks are moving from one place to another from their from their remote locations,
That's
and
right.
employers are calling everybody back to office, which may not be necessarily the place where the employee resides. So I think these are good pointers for employees to solicit your guidance and get them in the right direction and save them lots of money along the way as they make some of these very critical decisions. This makes a perfect segue. So, with the recent U.S. immigration policy changes in 2025, what should startup founders be aware of when planning to hire workforce which require employer sponsorship? You touched upon a few things, but if you had to pick like one, the most important change that they should be watching out, what would it be?
Well, the biggest change is the higher scrutiny that all applications across the board are going to be reviewed under. There's just going to be a higher standard, whether that be in an application for an H-1B. I mean, we're already seeing it this year where, jobs that are easily identified as professional occupations, you're getting these really huge requests for evidence on why is this professional, why is this person qualified, et cetera, et cetera. So there's just going to be a higher level of scrutiny, and from people who are not trained. Because, in addition to the changes in the immigration, there was also the big sort of federal layoffs and asking people to leave when the administration came in. And so a lot of the senior reviewing officers and immigration, people who are most knowledgeable about the types of petitions that are being submitted, were the most expensive. And so Doge came in and, and took them away. And so you have less people reviewing who have a higher volume, and they're not trained, and they have this edict to just have this higher reviewability. So the processing times will probably be longer. We're already seeing higher RFEs, a higher percentage of RFEs coming in, and we're, seeing standards that are being applied when reviewing the visa petitions that are not standards that are written in the regulations. So, well, you didn't prove, something that, possibly was in a an executive order that the president said needs to follow. And it's like, well, there are some things that an executive order can affect immediately. But when it comes to the eligibility of a visa, it takes an act of Congress. There is a legal process. If they want to make any changes at all, it has to go through a period of review, and they take comments, and then, they publish it, then they take more comments. It's a long process. And so, however, reviewers are sidestepping all of that. So you want someone on your side who's willing to sort of go to bat and to say, no, you have, included requirements that are not requirements. You've read into this, and take it a step farther, or predict that they are already going to have this higher standard, and then in your first filing address those issues, even if you don't need to or not required to, but just to appease the reviewer because you want a higher chance of being approved. And it also is happening at the consulates. So you see that now the visa waiver, the interview waiver program has been narrowed. So a lot of people are being called in now for interviews, which means, of course, longer waits to get those appointments. And then once you get there, a higher chance of being denied, even if you were approved by the USCIS. So you're going to need or want someone on your side to prepare each person every time they not only submit a petition or a visa application of any kind, non-immigrant or immigrant, but also whenever there's an interaction, either at the border or at the visa or the USCIS office, you really do need to be prepared. And it needs to be very close in time to when that interaction is happening, because there's daily changes and what's important or what's interesting. I mean, we see in the news now that the most important thing is social media posts, and they're checking, all the visa
Oh,
applicants
yeah.
and what their social media is. And so you need to talk to the person before they go in, and go the extra mile of reviewing all of their social media and ensuring that it's, compliant with, what they're looking for. And again, it's not about, there's nothing there that says you can't come into the United States if you make political statements that are against the administration's political views, but it's a de facto rule at the moment, unfortunately. So you have to be prepared for those things. Last month, it was, what was on your phone when you were going through the border. So again, being prepared for all of that and making sure that, you have a code versus just a fingerprint to open it up, because there's criminal laws involved with what they need a warrant to open the phone up with versus what they don't need a warrant, and what information are they looking for, or what are they reading into NIWs now. So again, it's about, all across the board there, it's just a higher level of scrutiny, which requires a higher level of preparation before you even bring yourself to in front of these immigration people. So you want to make sure you're selecting someone who has, you know um who is educating themselves on an absolute daily basis and keeping up on things, because you know I used to say, what worked for your cousin last year isn't going to work for you today, but it's literally like what happened last week is not may not work today. So,
All the more reasons they need Mia on their side.
well, again, and I'm happy to do it. I love it, but it's fun. Yeah.
Cool. I just have a last question for you. So how can some of these startup founders and HR leads, take the first step to work with a company like Denizen Immigration?
Yeah, I mean, we'd love to have them give a call and we could talk about, some strategies and whether we're a good fit or not. And they can find us on our website, denizenimmigration.com, DNIZEN.com. They can find us on LinkedIn. They can find us on Facebook. They can find us on Instagram at Denizen Destination. They can email me at mia@denizenimmigration.com. Plenty of places to contact us and find us. And again, I schedule strategy planning sessions for businesses in a complimentary way, because again, for me, it's about finding the right partner and the good fit. I need to make sure that the partner is a good fit for me, and that I'm a good fit for them, and that I'm the person who can help them, and that there's someone who's looking at finding a a strategic, compliant, building an immigration program, or taking back control of their immigration program and putting it into one. And again, it might be just dipping your toes in, or it might be in starting with your first, or it might be where you do have immigrants all over in different offices and you just want to sort of bring it all under one hat. But either way, would love to have a phone call or an email at mia@denizenimmigration.com, and we could talk about strategies.
Awesome, Mia. Thank you so much. This was wonderful for our audience, and this will be a wrap for our call today. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me, Nathan.